The stars around Vulcan Prime burned with weapons fire. Commander G1 stood on the bridge of the Eternal Sentinel, watching her fleet die. The viewing screen showed dozens of ships breaking apart, their shields failing against the endless swarm of enemy vessels. The Drath had come in numbers no one thought possible. "Ma'am, the Eastern Line just collapsed," Lieutenant Minho said from his station. His voice was steady, but G1 could see his hands shaking. "That's 3 entire battle groups gone in the last hour." G1 closed her eyes for a moment. The Velrathi were supposed to be the best tactical minds in the galaxy. Their energy shields were legendary. Their plasma cannons could cut through asteroids. But none of it mattered against the Drath swarm. The enemy learned too fast, adapted too quickly, and there were always more of them. "Pull back the remaining ships to defensive position 7, she ordered. "Focus all shield power to the planet. If we can't win, we at least buy time for the evacuation." The bridge crew worked quietly, each of them knowing the truth. There was no winning this battle. The Drath had destroyed 17 civilizations before this. The Velrathi would be number 18. The only question was how many civilians could escape before the end. Minho suddenly straightened at his console. "Commander, I'm receiving a transmission on an old frequency." "Very old." "The kind we used 500 years ago." "Ignore it," Juwan said. "We don't have time for—" "Ma'am, they're asking permission to join the battle." That made G1 turn. "Who is?" Minho looked confused as he read his screen. "They identify themselves as humans? From Earth? They say they're part of the Alliance now and want to help." G1 remembered humans vaguely. They were a new species, just discovered a few years ago. The Alliance had granted them observer status mostly as a courtesy. Their technology was primitive, their ships slow, their weapons basic. They used explosions to fly through space, for star's sake. Chemical reactions instead of proper quantum drives. "How many ships?" she asked. 300, ma'am. 300 ships wouldn't make a difference. The Drath had tens of thousands in this system alone. But G1 was desperate enough to accept any help, even symbolic gestures from primitives who didn't know better. "Grant them permission," she said. "Give them coordinates for the western flank. At least their sacrifice might buy us a few more minutes." 20 minutes later, the human fleet arrived. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel in a flash of blue light, and G1's sensors officer gasped. The human ships were nothing like Alliance vessels. They were angular and brutal-looking, covered in armor plating that seemed excessive. Weapon ports dotted every surface. They looked like they were built for one purpose only: fighting. "They're taking formation," Minho reported. "Very precise formation, ma'am." "Military standard, actually." A communication channel opened. The face that appeared on G1's screen was young for a captain, with dark eyes and a calm expression. He wore a simple uniform, dark blue with minimal decoration. "Commander G1, I'm Captain Deho of the United Earthship Indomitable," the human said. His language was translated automatically, but there was something strange about his tone. Confident, almost eager. "We're ready to support your defense. Tell us where you need us to hit them." G1 blinked. "Captain, I appreciate your courage, but you should know what you're facing. The Drath have destroyed every fleet we've sent against them. Their numbers are overwhelming, and they adapt to every tactic within minutes." Deho's expression didn't change. "Understood. Where do you need us?" There was no fear in his voice. No hesitation. G1 had seen veteran commanders with decades of experience show more concern than this human captain facing his first major battle. "The main swarm is pushing through Sector 4, she said slowly. "If you can draw their attention for even a short time, it would help our evacuation efforts." "We'll do better than that," Deho replied. "Indomitable out." The channel closed. Ji-won watched her tactical display as the human fleet moved. They didn't use the careful, energy-efficient movements that Alliance ships preferred. Instead, they burned fuel in massive amounts, accelerating their warships like fighters. It was wasteful and reckless. The Drath noticed them immediately. A portion of the swarm, perhaps 5,000 bioships, turned to face this new threat. The Drath moved with perfect coordination, every ship acting as part of a single organism. They had learned to counter energy shields, to dodge plasma fire, to overwhelm any defense through sheer numbers and perfect timing. They had never fought humans before. The human fleet didn't slow down as they approached. They didn't try to maintain safe distances or preserve their ships. They charged straight into the Drath formation like ancient cavalry. Ji-won watched in horror, certain she was about to witness 300 ships destroyed in seconds. Then the humans opened fire. The weapons were wrong. All wrong. Instead of elegant energy beams, the humans launched physical missiles that split apart into hundreds of smaller projectiles. Instead of precise plasma bolts, they fired solid metal slugs at incredible speeds. The Drath ships, expecting energy weapons they could adapt to, found themselves being torn apart by simple metal and explosives. "What are they doing?" Minho whispered. Ji-won couldn't answer. She watched as human ships dove through Drath formations, firing in all directions. When Drath bioships tried to close in, the humans didn't retreat. They rammed them. Actual ramming, like something from the ancient naval battles Ji-won had studied in history classes. One human destroyer took catastrophic damage to its engines. Instead of withdrawing, it fired escape pods for its crew and then drove straight into a cluster of Drath vessels. The explosion took out 20 enemy ships. "They're insane," Ji-won's tactical officer said. But the Drath were faltering. For the first time in the entire battle, the enemy swarm was confused. Their perfect coordination broke down as they tried to adapt to tactics that made no sense. The humans fought without pattern, without predictable behavior. Every ship seemed to make its own decisions, taking risks that should have been suicidal, but somehow worked. A communication came through from Captain Daeho again. His ship's bridge showed signs of damage now. Smoke drifted in the background, and there was blood on his uniform. But he was smiling. "Commander, we're pushing them back in Sector 4, he reported. "We can hold this position for as long as you need." Ji-won stared at him. The human fleet had been cut down to maybe 200 ships. They should be retreating. Every military doctrine in the Alliance said so. But they weren't. "Captain, you've taken heavy losses," she said carefully. "You don't have to—" "Yes, we do," Daeho interrupted. "Those are your people down there. That's reason enough? We'll hold." The channel closed again. Ji-won looked at her crew, all of them staring at the tactical display in shock. The humans were actually stopping the Drath advance. Not winning, exactly, but stopping it. Holding the line through sheer determination and a fighting style that defied all logic. "Minho," Ji-won said quietly, "get me the Alliance High Command. I need to report what I'm seeing. They won't believe it otherwise." "What should I tell them, ma'am?" Ji-won watched another human ship explode after ramming 3 Drath vessels. She watched the remaining human fleet continue to fight without fear, without hesitation, without any sense of self-preservation. "Tell them the humans are here," she said, "and tell them the battle just changed." The Drath swarm had never experienced confusion before. For thousands of years, they had functioned as a single mind controlling millions of bodies. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon moved with perfect coordination. They had destroyed civilizations that were older and more advanced than themselves simply by being better organized, more adaptable, and utterly relentless. But the humans made no sense. The Drath's hive consciousness analyzed the battle data streaming in from Sector 4. The humans used primitive chemical propulsion. Their weapons were kinetic projectiles and simple explosives. Their ships had no energy shields, just layers of metal armor. By every calculation, they should have been eliminated within minutes of engagement. Yet, they were winning. Commander Jiwan watched from the Eternal Sentinel as the human fleet tore through Drath formations like a blade through flesh. The humans fought without any recognizable pattern. One moment they would cluster together in tight formations. The next, they would scatter in all directions. They launched missiles that released clouds of metal fragments, creating debris fields that shredded Drath bioships. They fired metal slugs at speeds that turned them into devastating weapons upon impact. The Drath are trying to adapt, Minho reported. They're changing their formation to spread out and avoid the shrapnel weapons. Jiwan nodded. That was how the Drath always worked. They observed, they learned, they adapted. Within another hour, they would have developed counters to every human tactic. But then the humans changed tactics too. A squadron of human bombers broke formation and accelerated straight toward the largest Drath bioship, a massive creature the size of a city that served as a command node. The Drath moved to intercept, deploying smaller ships in a defensive screen. Standard tactics would call for the bombers to launch weapons and retreat. The humans didn't retreat. Colonel Haijin led the bomber squadron personally. Her voice came across open channels as she gave orders to her pilots. All ships, override reactor safeties. Push them to critical levels. We need electromagnetic pulse, maximum strength. Jiwan's blood went cold. They're going to overload their reactors? That's suicide. She opened a channel to the human squadron. Colonel Haijin, this is Commander Jiwan. You need to abort that attack. Your reactors will explode. The human colonel's face appeared on screen. She was young, maybe 30 standard years, with determined eyes. I know, Commander. That's the idea. But your crews will eject before the detonations. Most of them, anyway. Haijin smiled grimly. We've done this before. It works. The bombers pushed deeper into the Drath formation. Jiwan watched helplessly as they drove their reactors beyond safe limits, creating massive electromagnetic pulses that washed over the Drath ships. The bioships began to drift, their organic systems disrupted by the electromagnetic interference. The hive mind's control signals couldn't reach them. The human pilots ejected in small pods, most of them successfully. 3 didn't make it out in time. Their ships exploded in bright flashes, taking dozens of Drath vessels with them. Colonel Haijin's pod was recovered by another human ship. Within minutes, she was back on a command deck, coordinating the next attack. She didn't even mention the pilots who had died. To her, it was just the cost of the operation. Jiwan had fought in wars for 20 years. She had seen brave soldiers and desperate battles. But she had never seen anyone treat death so casually, so matter-of-factly. The humans didn't mourn during battle. They just kept fighting. The engagement continued for hours. The human fleet kept changing tactics faster than the Drath could adapt. When the Drath learned to avoid the shrapnel weapons, the humans switched to focused railgun fire. When the Drath began jamming communications, the humans went to visual signals and pre-planned maneuvers. When the Drath tried to surround them, the humans used their own damaged ships as improvised weapons. Commander, you need to see this, Minho said urgently. Jiwan looked at his tactical display. A human destroyer had lost its main engines and was venting atmosphere. The crew was evacuating in pods, but the ship itself was still operational on maneuvering thrusters. Instead of letting it drift, the captain had aimed it at a concentration of Drath ships and set the reactor to overload. The destroyer crashed into the enemy formation and detonated. The explosion destroyed 40 Drath bioships. They're using their own vessels as weapons, Jiwan's tactical officer said in disbelief. Even when they're already lost, they weaponize them. It was brilliant and horrifying. The Drath had adapted to counter-organized fleets with predictable tactics. They had learned to defeat energy weapons and shield technology. But the humans fought like every ship was expendable. Every tactic was temporary, and death was just another tool to be used. Captain Deho's voice came through on the command channel. Commander Jiwan, we've broken their main push. The Drath are pulling back to regroup. Jiwan checked her sensors. It was true. The Drath swarm, which had never retreated in any recorded battle, was withdrawing. Not defeated, but definitely disrupted. The humans had done in 12 hours what the entire Alliance fleet couldn't do in weeks. Captain, what are your casualties? She asked. There was a pause. We started with 300 ships. We have 147 still combat capable. Personnel losses are at 42%. Jiwan felt sick. The humans had lost more than half their fleet. Thousands of their people were dead. And Deho reported it like he was reading a weather report. Those losses are unacceptable, she said. By Alliance standards, you should have withdrawn when casualties reached 15%. Alliance standards aren't human standards, Commander, Deho replied. We came here to stop the Drath. Mission accomplished. The cost doesn't change whether it was acceptable or not. But your people knew what they signed up for. Every one of them volunteered. Deho's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry if our methods seem harsh, Commander. But we've learned that sometimes the only way to win is to be willing to pay a price others won't pay. The channel closed. Jiwan sat in her command chair, trying to process what she had witnessed. The humans had saved Velkin Prime. The evacuation was now unnecessary. The Drath had been stopped for the first time in years. It was a victory. But the cost was staggering. And the way the humans fought, with such disregard for their own lives, was deeply disturbing. Every other species in the Alliance had limits to what they would sacrifice. The humans seemed to have none. Ma'am, we're receiving requests from human ships for medical assistance, Minho said. Should we send aid? Yes, immediately, Jiwan ordered. Send every medical team we have. And Minho? Make sure our doctors are prepared. I suspect human casualties are going to be unlike anything they've seen before. As the Eternal Sentinel moved to assist the damaged human vessels, Jiwan couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. The humans had won this battle. They had proven themselves as warriors. But what kind of species fought this way? What kind of evolution produced beings who could look at certain death and charge forward anyway? She pulled up the file on humanity that the Alliance had compiled. A newly discovered species from a planet they called Earth. Gravity twice galactic standard. Aggressive predators. A history of constant warfare among their own kind. No unified government until very recently. The report noted that humans were classified as a developing species and should be observed carefully before full integration into Alliance society. Jiwan made a note in the file. Classification requires immediate revision. Humans are not developing. They are something else entirely. Recommend full military capability assessment. She looked out at the damaged human fleet, still holding formation despite their losses, still ready to fight if the Drath returned. The humans had saved them today. But Jiwan wondered if the galaxy was truly ready for what humanity represented. The Drath swarm had learned something today too. In the cold vastness of space, the hive mind processed the battle data and reached a conclusion. These new beings, these humans, were unlike any enemy encountered before. They were unpredictable, reckless, and terrifyingly effective. The Drath decided that humanity must be eliminated. Completely. before they could spread their chaotic fighting methods to the rest of the galaxy. The swarm began planning its next move, and for the first time in its existence, the hive mind felt something close to concern. The medical bay of the Eternal Sentinel was designed to handle casualties from energy weapons. Burns from plasma fire, radiation poisoning, shield overload injuries. Dr. Sunwoo had treated all of these conditions for 20 years. She thought she had seen every type of combat injury possible. Then the human wounded arrived. What in the stars happened to them? Her assistant asked, staring at the first group of human casualties being brought in on stretchers. Sunwoo didn't answer immediately. She was too busy trying to understand what she was looking at. The human soldiers had injuries from physical impacts. Broken bones, shrapnel wounds, burns from actual fire and explosions. One had been partially crushed when part of his ship's ceiling collapsed. Another had been exposed to vacuum for almost a minute before being rescued. They should all be dead. By any reasonable medical standard, these injuries were fatal. But the humans were still alive. Still conscious, in some cases. One soldier with a piece of metal lodged in his chest was trying to sit up, asking about his crew members. "Lie down," Sunwoo ordered, pushing him back gently. "You have a foreign object penetrating your thoracic cavity." "I know, Doc," the human said, wincing. "Hurts like hell. But I can still breathe, so it missed the important stuff." "How's my pilot?" Sunwoo scanned him with her medical equipment and froze. The metal had indeed penetrated his chest, missing his heart by centimeters and somehow avoiding his major blood vessels. But that wasn't what shocked her. The scan showed something else. The human had 2 lungs, but they were separate systems. If one failed, the other could still function. He had a backup circulatory pathway. His bones were incredibly dense, almost like metal themselves. His blood clotting factors were off the charts compared to any species she knew. "Your biology is redundant," she said, amazed. "Your body has backup systems." "Yeah, well, evolution on Earth was pretty rough," the soldier said. "You either got tough or you got dead." Over the next few hours, Sunwoo treated dozens of human casualties and made notes on everything she observed. The humans healed faster than any species on record. They could survive injuries that would kill a Vilrathi or a Korthan. Their pain tolerance was extraordinary, and their psychology was even more unusual than their biology. None of them complained. None of them asked to be sent home. They all wanted to know when they could return to duty. Captain Daeho came to the medical bay to check on his crew. He had refused treatment for his own injuries until all his people were cared for. Sunwoo finally cornered him and forced him to sit down for a scan. "You have 3 broken ribs and internal bleeding," she informed him. "I know," Daeho said, "but it's not severe. I can still function. You need immediate surgery. After I finish my duty roster." Sunwoo put her hands on her hips. "Captain, you could die." Daeho looked at her calmly. "Doctor, I've been to war before. This isn't my first injury. I know my limits. I promise I'll get the surgery as soon as I make sure my crew is taken care of." There was no arguing with him. Sunwoo let him go and returned to her research. She pulled up the Alliance file on Earth and started reading more carefully. What she found disturbed her. Earth was classified as a Class 9 death world. Gravity was twice galactic standard, which explained the humans' dense bones and powerful muscles. The atmosphere had higher oxygen content than most worlds, which made them prone to aggressive behavior. The planet had extreme weather, natural disasters, and an ecosystem full of predators. But the worst part was the history. Humans had spent their entire existence fighting, not just against their environment, but against each other. Wars between tribes, between nations, between ideologies. They had developed weapons specifically to kill other humans. Nuclear bombs, chemical agents, biological warfare. They had nearly destroyed themselves multiple times. The humans stopped fighting each other only 50 years ago when they finally formed a unified world government. And even then, it was a fragile peace. The report suggested that humans maintained their weapons and military forces out of habit more than necessity. Sunwoo realized something troubling. The humans weren't just good at warfare. They were evolved for it. Their bodies were built to take damage and keep fighting. Their minds could override survival instincts when duty required it. Their entire culture celebrated warriors and sacrifice. Commander Ji-won had invited Captain Daiho to the Eternal Sentinel's main bridge for a formal meeting. Sunwoo attended as the ship's chief medical officer. She wanted to hear what the human captain would say about his species' nature. Daiho arrived on time, still refusing medical treatment despite his injuries. He moved carefully but showed no pain. Ji-won gestured for him to sit, but he remained standing at attention. "Please sit," Ji-won insisted. "You're injured." "I can stand, Commander," Daiho replied politely. "What did you want to discuss?" Ji-won exchanged glances with her senior officers. "Captain, I wanted to personally thank you for what your fleet did today. You saved Vulcan Prime. You saved millions of lives. The Alliance owes humanity a debt we can never fully repay." "You don't owe us anything," Daiho said. "You asked for help. We gave it. That's what allies do. But the cost to your people was acceptable." Daiho's expression remained calm. "Every person in my fleet volunteered. They knew the risks. They fought anyway because it was the right thing to do." Sunwoo spoke up. "Captain, I've been treating your wounded. Your casualty rate is horrifying. How can you call that acceptable?" Daiho turned to her. "Doctor, what would have happened if we hadn't fought?" "The Drath would have taken Vulcan Prime," Sunwoo admitted. "And how many Velrathi would have died?" "Millions. Perhaps tens of millions." "Then our sacrifice saved more lives than it cost," Daiho said simply. "That's the calculation we made. That's why it was acceptable." Ji-won leaned forward. "Captain, I need to ask you something. Why do humans fight the way you do? Why are you willing to take such terrible losses? Every other species has a breaking point where survival instinct takes over. You seem to have none." Daiho was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "Commander, do you know what Earth was like? Our home world? I've read the reports. A harsh planet with difficult conditions." "It was hell," Daiho said bluntly. "High gravity that crushed our ancestors' spines. Predators that hunted us when we were still primitive. Diseases that killed millions. Natural disasters that destroyed entire civilizations. And through all of that, we survived. Not because we were the strongest or the fastest or the smartest. We survived because we refused to give up. We survived because when faced with extinction, we fought back with everything we had." He paused, and his voice grew softer. "And then we started fighting each other. For thousands of years, we killed our own kind over resources, territory, beliefs. We got very good at warfare because we had to. The tribes that didn't learn to fight effectively died out. The nations that couldn't defend themselves were conquered. We evolved to be warriors because on Earth, anything else meant extinction. But you're unified now," Ji-won said. "You have peace on your world." "We do," Daiho agreed. "But we remember what it took to get there. We remember the cost of failure. When we saw the Drath attacking you, we didn't see aliens we barely knew. We saw people who would die if we didn't help. And we couldn't let that happen. Not when we had the ability to stop it." Sunwoo felt a chill run down her spine. "So you fight with such desperation because you've never known any other way." "We fight with desperation because we know what happens when you don't," Daiho corrected. "We've seen civilizations fall. We've seen good people die because others weren't willing to pay the price to save them. We decided a long time ago that we would never be the ones who stood by and watched. Jiwan stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the damaged human ship still maintaining formation outside. Captain, I think I understand now. But I have to tell you, the rest of the Alliance may not react well to humanity's methods. Many species will see you as dangerous, violent, unstable. They might be right, Deho admitted. We are dangerous. We are violent when we need to be. But we're also the ones who showed up when you called for help. We're the ones who stood between the Drath and this planet. If that makes us monsters in their eyes, we'll accept that judgment. You're not monsters, Jiwan said quietly. You're just different. And the galaxy is going to have to adjust to that difference. Deho nodded. Commander, the Drath will be back. This was just one battle. When they return, they'll come prepared for human tactics. We'll need to work together, combine our strengths. Your technology and strategy with our willingness to do whatever is necessary. Agreed, Jiwan said. She held out her hand in the human gesture of agreement. Deho shook it firmly. I'll speak to the Alliance Council. They need to understand what humanity brings to this war. After Deho left, Sunwoo approached Jiwan. Commander, I have deep concerns about integrating humans into Alliance military operations. Their casualty tolerance, their aggressive tactics, their psychology. It's all so foreign to our understanding of warfare. I know, Jiwan said. But did you see the Drath retreat? I've been fighting them for 3 years, and I've never seen them pull back. The humans did in hours what we couldn't do in years. We need them, Doctor, whether we're comfortable with their methods or not. Sunwoo looked out at the human fleet. I just hope we understand the Alliance Council chamber was built to impress. Carved from a single massive crystal that grew naturally on the Korthan homeworld. It reflected light and patterns that were supposed to inspire thoughts of unity and peace. Representatives from 47 different species sat in a circle. Each had stations designed for their particular biology. Today, the chamber was anything but peaceful. Diplomat Nari stood at the center, trying to maintain her composure as voices rose around her. She was young for her position, barely 30 years old, and this was only her second time addressing the full council. The last time had been calm and procedural. This time, half the council seemed to be shouting, "Order!" Admiral Tajan of the Korthan Empire demanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. He was a massive being, nearly 3 meters tall, with thick armor plating that was part of his natural biology. His species had ruled a third of the galaxy before joining the Alliance. When he spoke, others usually listened. The human delegate will address the council's questions one at a time. Nari bowed respectfully. Thank you, Admiral. A representative from the Minari Collective spoke first. The Minari were small, delicate beings who relied on advanced technology to survive. Delegate Nari, we have reviewed the battle reports from Vulcan Prime. Your species suffered 42% casualties in a single engagement. This is beyond reckless. It borders on mass suicide. We saved Vulcan Prime, Nari replied calmly. The Drath were stopped. Millions of Velrethi civilians survived because human soldiers were willing to pay that price. But at what cost to your own people? Another representative demanded. The Alliance has rules of engagement. We withdraw forces when casualties reach 15%. It's basic military doctrine designed to preserve lives. Nari took a breath. She had prepared for this question. The Alliance doctrine assumes that preservation of military assets is the primary goal. Human doctrine assumes that completing the mission is the primary goal. Different assumptions lead to different tactics. Barbaric tactics, someone muttered. Admiral Tajan raised his hand for silence. Delegate Nari, I will be direct. Your species has weapons designed specifically to kill other humans. Nuclear bombs, biological agents, kinetic bombardment systems. You have an entire section of your military dedicated to what you call special operations that focuses on assassination and sabotage. Your culture celebrates warfare in your entertainment, your literature, your history. How does the Council know that humans won't turn these weapons against Alliance members? The question hung in the air. Every eye in the chamber was on Nari. This was the moment she had dreaded. How do you explain humanity's violent past to species who had known peace for thousands of years?
Admiral, you're right about everything you said, Nari began.
Humans do have weapons designed to kill other humans. We do have a military culture. We do celebrate warriors in our stories. And I won't apologize for any of that, because it's the truth of what we are. She walked slowly around the circle, making eye contact with each representative. But do you know why we have those weapons? Why we developed them? It wasn't to conquer the stars. It was to survive against each other. That's exactly what concerns us, the Minari representative said.
Let me finish, Nari said firmly.
Earth never had a unified government until 50 years ago. Before that, we had hundreds of separate nations, thousands of different tribes and cultures. We fought wars constantly, not because we were evil, but because we were competing for limited resources on a harsh world. The nations that developed the best weapons survived. The ones that didn't were conquered or destroyed. She paused at the viewport, showing the stars beyond. We learned warfare through necessity. We got good at it because the alternative was extinction. But we also learned something else. We learned the cost of war. We learned that fighting among ourselves was destroying us. So we stopped. We unified. We turned our weapons away from each other and toward the common goal of exploring space.
Pretty words, Admiral Tajin said. But actions matter more. Why should we trust you?
Nari turned to face him directly. Because when Commander Jiwon called for help, we came. We didn't ask what we would gain. We didn't negotiate for territory or resources. We came because people needed help, and we had the ability to provide it. Isn't that what the Alliance is supposed to be about? A new voice spoke up. It was the representative from the Volrathi, a senior diplomat named Quan. The human delegate speaks truth. My people owe humanity a debt we cannot repay. The humans risked everything to save a world they had no obligation to defend. One act of heroism doesn't erase the danger they represent, the Minari representative argued. Perhaps not, Quan agreed. But it should count for something. The Drath have destroyed 17 civilizations. The Alliance fleet has been unable to stop them. In one battle, the humans accomplished what we could not. Should we reject that capability out of fear? The debate continued for hours. Nari answered question after question, trying to help the Council understand humanity without hiding the darker aspects of human nature. She explained Earth's history, the wars, the weapons, the constant struggle for survival. She also explained humanity's values: loyalty, courage, the willingness to sacrifice for others. Finally, Admiral Tajun called for a decision. The Council must vote on whether to allow humans full military participation in Alliance operations. Those in favor? The Chamber's voting system activated. Lights appeared above each representative station, indicating their vote. Green for yes, red for no, yellow for abstention. The results were close. 24 in favor, 19 against, 4 abstentions. The measure passes, Tajin announced. Humans will be granted full military status within the Alliance. However, there will be restrictions. Human forces will operate under Alliance command structure. Human weapons of mass destruction are prohibited from use without Council approval. And human tactics must be reviewed and approved before implementation in joint operations.
Nari wanted to argue against the restrictions, but she held her tongue. This was better than she had hoped for. The humans were in. They could fight alongside the Alliance officially. The restrictions could be negotiated later. "The Council thanks the human delegate," Teijin said formally. "You may return to your quarters." Nari bowed and left the chamber. Outside, she found Commander Jiwan waiting. "How did it go?" the Velrathi commander asked. "We're in, but with restrictions," Nari replied. "They're afraid of us?" "They should be," Jiwan said quietly. "I've seen what humans can do in battle. It's terrifying. But it's also our best chance against the Drath." "Do you think we can win?" Nari asked. Jiwan looked at the stars visible through the station's massive windows. "I don't know. But I know we couldn't win without you. The question is whether the rest of the galaxy can accept what it takes to defeat an enemy like the Drath." Far across the galaxy, in the dark spaces between stars, the Drath swarm gathered. The hive mind had made its decision. Humanity represented a fundamental threat to the Drath's existence. Their unpredictable tactics, their willingness to sacrifice, their ability to inspire other species to fight more aggressively, all of this had to be eliminated. The Drath began moving forces toward Earth, not just a raiding force or an exploration fleet. The entire swarm, millions of bioships, representing the combined might of a species that had consumed 17 civilizations. They would destroy Earth completely, burn it until nothing remained, eliminate humanity before they could spread their dangerous ideas throughout the galaxy. The hive mind calculated the time required to reach Earth: 6 months. In 6 months, humanity would face extinction. The Drath felt something close to satisfaction. This threat would be removed permanently. But the hive mind had made one crucial error in its calculations. It had learned about human tactics, human weapons, and human biology. It had studied the battle at Velkin Prime in detail. What it hadn't learned was what humans did when their home was threatened. What humans were capable of when fighting for their own survival instead of someone else's. The Drath didn't understand that every battle they had observed so far was humanity showing restraint, fighting carefully because they were guests in someone else's system, protecting someone else's world. When Earth was threatened, the Drath would learn what humans were really like when they stopped holding back. On the Alliance station, Nari received a priority message from Earth's Defense Command. The message was simple. Multiple Drath fleets detected on approach vector to Sol system. 8 to 6 months. All human forces recalled to defensive positions. Prepare for total war. Nari showed the message to Jiwan. "This is it," Jiwan said. "They're going after Earth directly. Then we fight," Nari said simply. "We defend our home. The Alliance will help," Jiwan promised. "I'll make sure of it. You saved our world. We'll help save yours." Nari smiled grimly. "Commander, you should probably tell the Alliance to prepare their people for what they're about to see. Because if you thought the Battle of Velkin Prime was intense, you haven't seen anything yet. You saw humans fighting for someone else. Now you're going to see humans fighting for their own survival." "That worries me," Jiwan admitted. "It should," Nari replied. "It should worry everyone." 6 months passed faster than anyone wanted. Earth's sky filled with ships as every human vessel in the galaxy returned home. Orbital stations that had been used for peaceful research were converted to military installations. Civilian ships were retrofitted with weapons. The entire human species mobilized for war. Admiral Deho stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the U's Indomitable Mark II. The original Indomitable had been destroyed at Velkin Prime, but the name lived on. Around him, 300 human warships held position in defensive formations around Earth. It wasn't nearly enough. "Sir, sensor update," his tactical officer reported. Drath fleet strength estimated at 12,000 ships. They'll be in weapons range in 4 hours. 12,000. The humans had 300. The math was simple and brutal. Any word from the Alliance? Deho asked. Commander G1 is inbound with a mixed fleet. 8 at 2 hours. Total strength, approximately 500 ships. So they would have 800 ships total against 12,000. Still terrible odds, but better than facing the Drath alone. Deho had to give the Alliance credit. They had kept their promise to help defend Earth, despite the danger. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Earth Defense Command, the communications officer said. Admiral Taryn wants to speak with you. Deho accepted the call. Admiral Taryn was older than him, a veteran of Earth's last major war before unification. She had white hair and sharp eyes that had seen too much combat. Deho, the Drath are 3 hours out, Taryn said without preamble. I'm authorizing full defensive protocols. That includes weapons we kept restricted during the Vulcan Prime engagement. Deho felt his stomach tighten. Ma'am, are you sure? The Alliance representatives on Earth will know what we're deploying. I don't care what they think, Taryn replied. This is our homeworld. Our families are down there. Every human who ever lived was born on that planet. I'm not holding anything back to make aliens comfortable. Understood, ma'am. What assets are we releasing? Everything. Nuclear mines are being deployed in a shell around Earth. Railgun platforms are active on the moon. We're bringing the kinetic bombardment satellites online. And Deho? We're authorizing use of the Prometheus weapons. Deho closed his eyes briefly. The Prometheus weapons were humanity's most closely guarded secret. Antimatter warheads, capable of destroying entire fleets. The Alliance didn't know they existed. The weapons had been developed during Earth's darkest period of warfare and then hidden away when peace came. The Alliance will not react well to finding out we have antimatter weapons, Deho said quietly. They can complain after we survive, Taryn said. Prometheus authorization codes are being sent to all fleet commanders now. Use them if necessary. That's an order. Yes, ma'am. The channel closed. Deho looked at his crew. They all knew what this meant. Humanity was about to reveal capabilities they had kept secret. The Alliance would see exactly how advanced human weapons technology really was. There would be political consequences. But none of that mattered if Earth fell. 2 hours later, Commander G1's fleet arrived. Her ship, the Eternal Sentinel, took position alongside the Indomitable. Other Alliance vessels spread out in the defensive formation, their energy shields glowing softly. G1 opened a direct channel to Deho. Admiral, your defensive preparations are impressive. But I'm detecting weapons platforms we haven't seen before. What are you deploying? Everything we have, Commander, Deho replied honestly. This is our home. We're not holding back. G1 studied him for a moment. I understand, just try not to surprise me too much when the fighting starts. No promises, Deho said with a slight smile. The Drath arrived exactly when predicted. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel in a massive wave, their bioships filling the sensor displays. 12,000 vessels, all connected through the hive mind, all moving with perfect coordination. All ships, battle stations, Deho ordered. Weapons free. Engage at will. The human fleet moved first, charging forward with their characteristic aggression. But this time, they had home field advantage. The nuclear mines activated, creating a deadly field that the Drath had to navigate. The Drath adapted quickly, using smaller ships to trigger the mines and clear paths for their larger vessels. Then the moon-based railguns opened fire. Massive projectiles accelerated to incredible speeds, crossing the distance to the Drath fleet in seconds. Each shot had enough kinetic energy to punch through dozens of bioships. The Drath formation shattered as hundreds of their vessels were destroyed in the opening salvo. Jiwan watched in amazement. Those are railguns? The power requirements must be enormous. The moon has nuclear reactors built specifically to power them, Deho explained. We built them 50 years ago during our last major war. Never thought we'd actually need to use them. The Drath adapted, spreading their formation to minimize railgun effectiveness. That's when the human fleet hit them with missile swarms. Thousands of missiles, each one splitting into dozens of submunitions. The space between Earth and the Drath became a cloud of explosions and debris. But the Drath kept coming. For every ship destroyed, 2 more took its place. They were learning human tactics, adapting their formations, finding weaknesses in the defense. A young pilot named Sejun led a squadron of fighters in desperate combat. His sister, Lieutenant Gina, coordinated from a ground station, directing the orbital defenses. They worked together, Sejun's squadron drawing Drath ships into kill zones where Gina's railguns could eliminate them. "Brother, you have incoming on your 6. Gina's voice crackled over the comm. "I see them," Sejun replied, spinning his fighter and launching countermeasures. "How's the planetary shield holding?" "At 80%. But we can't sustain this rate of attack for long." Sejun gritted his teeth. His fighter shook as a Drath weapon burst near him. "Then we need to end this fast." On the Indomitable, Deho watched the tactical display. The battle was going badly. The human and Alliance fleets were taking heavy casualties. The Drath were pushing through the defensive lines. In another hour, they would be in position to bombard Earth directly. "Sir, the Drath are concentrating their forces for a major push," his tactical officer reported. "They're forming up around their largest bioships." Deho made his decision. Deploy the Prometheus weapons. Target the concentration points. Across the human fleet, compartments opened on a dozen ships. Missiles emerged, different from the others. Sleeker, more advanced. Each one carrying a small amount of antimatter and magnetic containment. Jiwan's sensors detected them immediately. "Deho, what are those?" "I'm reading energy signatures that shouldn't be possible." "Commander, you might want to turn down your shields for the next 60 seconds, Deho said. "The electromagnetic pulse is going to be significant." "Electromagnetic pulse from what? What did you just launch?" The Prometheus missiles reached the Drath concentrations and detonated. Matter met antimatter in perfect annihilation. The explosions were small by stellar standards, but in the confines of a fleet battle, they were devastating. White light flooded the battlefield as thousands of Drath bioships simply ceased to exist. The electromagnetic pulse washed over both fleets. Human ships, designed with shielding against their own weapons, rode it out. Alliance ships, unprepared, had their systems temporarily disrupted. Jiwan's bridge went dark for several seconds before emergency power restored. When her sensors came back online, Jiwan stared at the display in shock. A third of the Drath fleet was gone. Just gone. Destroyed in an instant by weapons that shouldn't exist. "You had antimatter weapons," she said quietly. "This whole time, you had antimatter weapons and you didn't tell us." "We hoped we'd never need them," Deho replied. "But this is Earth, Commander. Our home. We'll use whatever it takes to defend it." The Drath, for the first time in their existence, experienced something close to fear. The hive mind processed the data from the antimatter explosions and reached a conclusion. They had underestimated humanity. Severely. But the Drath were not done. They adapted, spreading their fleet even wider, making concentrated formations impossible. They pushed forward with renewed aggression, accepting terrible losses to close the distance to Earth. That's when Dr. Sun Wu's contribution entered the battle. Working with human scientists, she had perfected the biological weapon she started developing months ago.
a virus that disrupted the Drath's quantum neural entanglement, the weapon that would break the hive mind's control. Human bombers, piloted by volunteers, penetrated deep into the Drath formation. They released the virus in aerosol form, spreading it through the enemy fleet. The effect was immediate and horrifying. Drath bioships began firing on each other, their crew members acting independently without the hive mind's coordination. Chaos spread through the enemy formation. Seojan's squadron provided cover for the bombers. "This is it," he told his pilots. "Give them everything. For Earth." The fighters dove into the confused Drath fleet, weapons blazing. Seojan's fighter took multiple hits but kept flying. He could see Earth below, beautiful and blue, the world where his ancestors were born. He thought of his sister down there, coordinating the defenses. He thought of every human who ever lived. A Drath ship locked onto him. Seojan's fighter was too damaged to evade. He made a choice.